in a column for The Sun, said that Donald Trump is more popular than ever and likened his comeback to that of Frank Sinatra, citing Trump's resilience and humor as two major factors in his resurgence here. Anyway, joining us now to explain all of this, the host of Uncensored with Piers Morgan. There's no such thing as a censored Piers Morgan. We should say this before at the outset here. The morning you walked off the set of the #1 morning show in Great Britain, I wrote you. I said, whatever you do, don't quit. And I don't know if that message got to you or not. But
no, it did. But you know what, Sean? They said to me, if you apologise to Meghan Markle for disbelieving her, then you can keep your job. But the problem was, it would be like saying you apologising to Pinocchio for believing Pinocchio. So I decided, on balance, better to walk.
You know, it's funny because, you know, Liberal Joe, as I call him, Scarborough, I mean, he used to claim he's a conservative. And it's like, you know, he just has adopted this liberalism because he wants to be on television. He used to beg, you know, people here to please hire him, and he didn't like the place he was working at, so he figured, well, he's not going to get hired here, might as well do that. Let's talk about what you see about Trump. You'd been critical of President Trump. I thought the speech he gave in Iowa was gracious. I thought my last town hall with him, very measured, smart, funny. We're seeing a little bit different side of him, not talking as much about 2020 anymore, and he's looking forward. I think it's helpful.
Well, hallelujah to that last point, because when I last interviewed President Trump, I did say to him, look, I just think you've got to move on from looking back to 2020 all the time. You've got to present a vision for America going forward for 2024, and you can get re-elected. And I noticed that he's now stopped talking nearly so much about 2020. He's talking about 2024, and he's showing all the best sides of Donald Trump, which you and I have always known have been there. He's shown the charm. He's shown the incredible resilience. He really is the comeback kid. I would have said a year ago there was no chance he would have done what he did in Iowa. He also is showing that humor, which seems to upset all the right people. You know, I thought that hilarious line he did in Iowa when he said, you know, even if it kills you, basically, your vote will count. The people taking that seriously are exactly the kind of people I can't stand.
He was even half laughing when he said it.
Of course. Of course. It was a joke. So I think you put it all together. Look, Donald Trump is not an angel, but nor is he a devil. And I've always respected his remarkable ability to withstand the kind of pressure that would knock off any other public figure I know. You know, I remember talking to him many years ago about what happened in the financial crash of the mid-90s, when all his friends went under pretty much. And I said, how did you manage to keep going? And he said, you know what? I just had to not do what they were doing, which was running home to mummy and crying and saying, isn't life unfair? I dug down, I moved forward, and I carried through the storm. And I remember that. And I've watched him do it again this year when, as charge after charge after charge has come at him, he has got stronger and the polling for him has improved, because even Republicans that don't really like Donald Trump can see that there is a witch hunt element to all this, that the Democrats are trying to kill him off, but by doing so, they're making him more popular. And Donald Trump can feel that. And I watched him last night with you, Sean, and I thought, I see a guy right on top of his game, absolutely determined to get back to the White House. I think he's pretty much got the nomination in the bag. I think he's going to win in New Hampshire and South Carolina quite comfortably. I think this is all over probably before Super Tuesday. And then, honestly, who would put money right now on Donald Trump not beating Joe Biden when Joe Biden can barely string a sentence together and can barely stand on his own 2 feet?
If it is Joe Biden, you said something that is key, and this is unique for both of us, is I've known Donald Trump almost 30 years, long before he ever contemplated a run for the presidency or getting involved in politics. In real life, he is one of the funniest people you'll ever meet, one of the most generous, gregarious, friendly, warm even, and interesting people you'll ever meet.
And loyal. And
he's extremely loyal.
And he's like you like that. So when I left CNN, for example, you messaged me, and Donald Trump rang me and wrote to me numerous times in the next few months, and I never forgot that. And, you know, and you're the same. And I think that loyalty is a big trump card for him. Now, you know, like I say, he's not perfect. There are many things I've disagreed with Donald Trump about, and I've gone toe-to-toe with him about a few big issues. So I'm not going to pretend for a moment that I think everything he does is right. But I do think JP Morgan boss Jamie Dimon got it right when he said, if you try and demonize everyone that is currently voting for Donald Trump, A, you're demonizing maybe 100 million Americans. But secondly, you don't understand why they're voting for him. Last election was basically a referendum on Trump, who had a year of a global pandemic with all the catastrophic fallout. And Biden was able to hide in his bunker and exploit that and run as an anti-Trump candidate. This time round, if it is Trump-Biden, it will be a referendum on Joe Biden's presidency, which, judging by his current approval ratings, is incredibly unpopular with the American public. Very, very different battle.
And he doesn't have to change who he is. That's the interesting part of this. Let Trump be Trump, and he is a fighter. But Americans kind of need a fighter right now. The world stage needs an American leader. We see what's happening in Europe. We see what's happening in the Middle East. But the side of Donald Trump that we know that maybe it doesn't show as often, I think it's to his benefit to also show that time. And it's sincere. It's not contrived.
I think he's taking advice from you and other people. And I think he's got to pivot.
No, he doesn't listen to me.
Well, I think he does. I think he does, actually, more than probably that you get credit for. But I do think that, and you know, he's frustrating Donald Trump because people who like him, and I've known him a long time, and he's been very good to me. People who like him are frustrated by him because occasionally he will just do stuff and he go, "Come on, don't do that." And I think I noticed that speech at Iowa. It was very gracious, very warm, and when he talks about being inclusive, if he means that. My God, America needs to come together again.
It sure does.
There's #1 superpower in the world, but so fractured and divided. If Donald Trump Mark II back in the White House can be a force for unity, I'm all for it.
Let me tell you, the world, since Joe Biden's been president, abdicating its role in the world stage has not been good for anybody.
No.
And his policies worked. It's really that simple. So, Piers, great to see you.
Great to see you.
I miss hanging out with you, my friend, and hopefully see you soon. Thank you.
I would love that.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.